Today's guest is someone I'm very excited to speak to, widely regarded as possibly one of the best football commentators around at the moment. Working for Sky Sports, welcome Rob Palmer. How are you, Rob?
Very well, thanks yourself. Is that Hull
Oh,
City colours you're wearing
absolutely. Yeah.
then? Good to see.
How you been, Rob? All right.
Yeah, life is good. It's not exactly a 2 week break. You kind of go mad when the football season starts, but when you're working in this industry, you kind of pray, probably like the players as well and the managers, for an international break. So this is the last day of my international break. I'm preparing to do a Spanish game this weekend, and there's no point kind of doing it unless you come to Spain. So I've been over in Spain in the sunshine for the last 4 or 5 days. So yeah, life doesn't get any better in where we're now October than this at this moment in time. But it's back to work this weekend.
I feel a little bit bad, really, because the last few weeks we've been trying to sort this out, and your schedule's been manic. I
Yeah, no,
apologize for
it's
that.
not a hassle. You just find that when you're working, that kind of, especially the working hours of the day and the evenings when I'm doing a lot of matches, you find that, every minute is accounted for. So this week's been nice in that I've actually had a diary where there's been no plans, and I've actually seen my wife for a few days, which has been a bonus just in case she's watching.
Well, that's brilliant then, isn't it? Getting the good books and all that.
Yeah, and we went to see Malaga play as well. So I didn't escape from football totally. Went to see Malaga, who used to be in La Liga and now in the third tier of Spanish football. But it was brilliant. That 25,000 there, and a midday kickoff in the beautiful Spanish sunshine. It was a cracking game.
Oh, that's right. Make us English that feel all left out in the cold and the wet and the stormy weather we've got over here.
Absolutely. Well, coming
But
back, I'll be coming back to it.
you are widely regarded by many as the voice of La Liga in this country. How did that sort of come about then?
I guess it actually goes back to my days at Granada Television when I was there, kind of the main commentator when football was regional at ITV, and I was the man at Granada. And my boss came to me and said, "I'm going to teach you a skill here, which is going to serve you for the rest of your career." And he took me in a commentary booth, put a tape on, because it was tapes back in those days, of a Spanish football game, and said, "You need to commentate off this because we're going to get the La Liga action probably flown over to us. And we're going to have a show on a Monday night." There used to be Scorcho. So there's only the supported football fans in Wales that could see it on Scorcho on Channel 4, I think it was. So we brought Spanish football to the viewers in the northwest of England on a recorded game, which I hadn't been to, on a Monday night in a 15-minute format. And then once a month, I think we went to a local kind of restaurant in Manchester, and we performed a show which on Sky later became Revista de la Liga, where we look back at all of the games and all of the various characters in this restaurant, took on one of the Spanish teams and gave us the information on Real Madrid or Barcelona or Atletico Madrid. We've got Howard Kendall involved. Then when I went to Sky Television, I was mainly working there as a correspondent on the fledgling Sky Sports News channel, but I was desperate to commentate, and the Spanish football contract came to Sky Television. The football executive took me in and said, "Look, we've got this. If you want to do it," well, I don't know if anyone's going to be interested, but this will be your bag, give it a go. And we started doing Barcelona. My first kind of month in the job was with Bobby Robson, who was now...
Oh, what a man. What a man.
Yeah, well, you say that now, but he had been the England manager. You know how we treat England managers in England. He was kind of sent into exile. So he'd been out of the country for a while. He'd been in Portugal, he'd been at PSV Eindhoven, and he'd resurfaced at Barcelona as the manager. And he was kind of unheard of. He'd been off the radar for a number of years. So one day I just rang Barcelona to see if I could maybe to his secretary to arrange a chat with him. And he literally picked up the phone and he said, "Hello, son, who's that?" So it's Rob Palmer from Sky, and we've got the Spanish football contract, and obviously you're there. Come over. And this was like on a Friday. They were playing on the Monday night. So I headed over to see them play Extremadura in a Monday night game. I think it was like a 10 o'clock kickoff at night. And we spent a day in the life of him, myself and a really talented cameraman called Paul Quinn. And we just filmed everything, a day in the life of a Barcelona manager, up to kind of... He took us out on the pitch, and he pulls this young kid over he's just signed from Holland, and he says, Ronaldo, come here. Sky Television, look at the camera. And he said, "This lad's going to be, he's mustard. He's going to be brilliant. He's done it in Holland. We've signed him here. He's going to be one of the best in the world." And that was, the Brazilian Ronaldo Nazario. He had Luis Figo out there as well. And he had an awkward period at that time, Bobby Robson. It was that spell between Johan Cruyff and then Cruyff all gone wrong, and then Van Gaal was coming in, so Bobby had the job for a year. So that was kind of my initiation. I was thrown into it, and then for 2 decades, it became a staple diet of a whole generation of football fans on Saturdays and Sunday nights, and the Revista show as well on Sky. So I think most footy fans in their 20s and 30s have got a preference, be it Barcelona or Real Madrid, be it Ronaldo or be it Messi.
Of course, yeah. Now, you obviously just talking about Bobby Robson there. I'm just wondering, do you think as the years have gone on, since the Barcelona days and all the success he did have in his career, do you think we sort of can look back now in a different light and go, wow, we thought he was good then as a manager and as a coach, but not many other English/British coaches have been able to replicate what he's done by going abroad, by being able to adapt to different lifestyles, lots of the different languages, the egos that are in these teams, as you know. Do you think that he was maybe a little bit underappreciated compared to how he would have been if he was still in his prime now?
It's a really good point. You have to take into account what he did at a provincial club at Ipswich Town and won the league with them, took them into Europe, had major success there, brought players through their system and made Ipswich, which is this outpost, a place to go. And they brought in the Dutch players, and they became one of the powerhouses in English football. Then he became England manager, and the first thing I ever read on radio was the Sun headlines saying, "Bobby, for God's sake, go now." After some poor England performance. So they were asking, I think that'd be about, would that be 88, 89? They were slating him and asking him to go then. And, then he came back and he did brilliantly in the World Cups. And then he went abroad and discovered himself and did a great job in Portugal, in Holland. And then, in Barcelona, he followed Terry Venables, who's the other, great English manager and an England national team manager to head abroad. And he won the European Cup, didn't he? That was a bit before my time. Terry Venables as well. So yeah, maybe because sometimes when they're out of sight, they're out of mind, which is maybe what we're going to get with Jude Bellingham at the moment, because La Liga isn't really freely available in the UK at the moment, and people are not seeing his brilliance week in, week out when he's scoring 10 goals in 10 matches, and people over there in Spain who've seen some great players, they've seen some messiahs in their time, and
they can be brutal, can't they? The fans, they don't mess around. If they don't like the player or they don't think he's pulling his weight, they'll let him know.
Absolutely, and it's the opposite with him. They think he's the new thing. He's could be the best player at Galactico for the next 10 years. They've had Messi, they've had Ronaldo, they've had Zidane, they've had Figo, and they think he could be this thing. And there's talk of him signing maybe a 10-year contract at the club because they've taken to him so much, and he loves La Liga and playing at arguably the biggest club in the world.
I mean, that's amazing to see, though, isn't it? Because not enough English players take the chance, do they, and go abroad at a young age.
No, very few do. I mean, Beckham went, but Beckham was basically finished when he went to Real Madrid. Michael Owen went.
He sort of had to go, didn't he? The circumstances at United dictated that he was no longer required over there. So where better to go than
well, if you pull that with Fergie, there's no hanging around at Manchester United. And he certainly, if you've watched the documentary, certainly I was around as reporting at that point, and for months, you knew it was inevitable he was going to go. And Beckham, with David Beckham's name, I don't think he was actually a good enough player to play for Real Madrid. If you're honest, he didn't make such a big impact over there, and they kind of dropped him. And he did the deal halfway through the season to head over to America, and he was effectively finished.
See, interesting you say that, because I watched the David Beckham doc a few days ago. In the doc, there's sort of talks with his ex Real Madrid teammates, like Michel Salgado, Luis Figo, and the like. I remember hearing Luis Figo talk about when Beck's first arrived there, and how he sort of he had the right wing position as his own for years at that point. He wasn't really sure that the team needed him. Do you think, looking back now, having seen various Real Madrid teams live in person yourself, was it a case that Bex was just not good enough in that team at that moment, or was it that the team was just filled with so many stars, even ones that couldn't even make the bench, really, that he just sort of didn't have as much room to shine because of that?
I think David Beckham is a very good player. I don't think he's probably touching world class. When you're talking world class, I think you're talking Ronaldo, Messi, Figo, Zidane, maybe Bellingham, Mbappe. That's my level for world class. I don't think Mbappe ever reached it either. And I think if you speak to the players at Manchester United, they'll say that they didn't regard him as highly as the likes of Van Nistelrooy or Paul Scholes behind the scenes, certainly Cantona, players of that level, the great players. I think he's regarded as a very good player at Manchester United. And I think, how do I say this? He's a great self-publicist. He's certainly got the very best out of his career. He was a player that didn't have a great deal of pace. His left foot wasn't great, but his right foot was magical. He could take a free kick. He could turn the game. He had press as well. I think Robert actually signed him because it was the Galactico era. I once interviewed Florentino Perez, the president, who said he wanted to turn Real Madrid into the Disneyland of football. He wanted it to be this kind of theme park where people came and they were just amazed at what they were seeing. And it was the end of that kind of cycle of Galactico players. And Beckham came in there just as, the wow factor had maybe gone with the players that they'd had. And they brought Beckham in, and then Beckham again, he was selling shirts. He was getting people there. I used to go to Real Madrid and turn up at the training ground, and Steve McManaman became a good friend and associate, and be able to just turn up on a Thursday or a Friday, whatever media day was, grab him, have a coffee with him, do an interview with him, head off, have a chat with Figo. Seedorf had been there, the English players that would always come and talk to Sky Sports. When Beckham was there, you ended up with this like security force around it and armed guards, and you couldn't get anywhere near the place. I used to go see Steve McManaman, and he'd sneak out the back door of the hotel and we'd have a chat, but he'd say front of house. You wouldn't believe what was going on. So he created this kind of Hollywood aura about Real Madrid, but on the field never really did it. And if you've seen the documentary, and I remember it vividly, that they took him off in the final. He got injured in the final game, and Reyes came on, and Reyes actually, as his replacement, I think he scored one and created one and turned the game as well. So it was in the autumn days of Beckham's career. He'll go down in the history, but I think if you walk around the Real Madrid museum, you're not really going to see his face in too many places.
Good point. I mean, I suppose when you've got the legacy and the history of a club like that, then you've got to be some player to get in that museum, I suppose.
Which is remarkable what Bellingham is doing now. We go around back to the original point that Bellingham is doing that. He's not going to continue at a goal a game ratio, because that's not what they've signed him to do. But he's certainly hit the ground running, and his age, and he's got no fear whatsoever. And he seeks, he said in his unveiling that he used to watch the Saturday and Sunday night Real Madrid games, and he's a genuine Real Madrid fan as well. So he's living the dream.
He absolutely is. How refreshing is it to see that someone so young has the mindset, the confidence, as well as the ability to just seamlessly just go from playing in Germany at Dortmund, which is a big club in their own right, to an even bigger club, probably the biggest you're going to get. He's took to the transition seamlessly, hasn't he? Because sometimes when players move to a different country and there's more pressure, it doesn't always happen that way.
Yeah, he's a bit older than Rodrigo and Vinicius Junior, two Brazilian players who they brought over. I was going to say they're similar age. They were probably 19 when they came over. And they took a couple of years to come to terms with the standards that are set at Real Madrid. And, now they're proving to be Brazilian internationals. And I think in truth, Ancelotti probably would have thought, well, we've still got Cruz, we've still got Modric there. He can learn the trade off them. They'll do a little job share. And now when he names the team sheet, and he's great, Ancelotti actually names the team sheet 2 hours before kickoff, which is great for our job. Bellingham is virtually the first name on that team sheet, and then it's going to be either Cruz or it's going to be Modric, and they're not playing every game, and it's the 2 old-timers that are rotating, and Bellingham is there as a constant. He started 10 out of the 11 games so far this season, whereas the other lads have played half of the matches between them.
Obviously, you've covered La Liga for many, many years now, and I think I read somewhere recently that you've only missed one El Clasico, and that was in '96. How on earth have you managed to keep that streak up? That's amazing.
I've not commentated on every single one. I've actually either been to. I've either commentated or been to, I think, every game since '96. We had one season when we lost the contract at Sky that I didn't do it, but I got asked to do it for a betting company. So I did one of the 2 that season for a betting company. And now my main employer is ESPN, the United States. In the United States, ESPN Plus, they do every single La Liga game. And Ian Dark is the senior commentator there. We've got the Classic in a couple of weeks. Ian will be doing that one. I think this is the first one I've not been to. The previous ones, I'm actually doing another game that weekend. But the other games, if I've not been commentating on it, I've been there as part of the coverage at ESPN for the last 2 or 3 seasons. We did the first one last year as well. It actually went out on a US network, went out on ABC. So that was a real groundbreaking. Yeah.
What are the biggest moments that you've sort of witnessed in Spanish football? Any that stand out?
I'm one of those people that's useless. You asked me on Monday morning what the score was on Saturday night when I'm doing the game. I won't remember. A good friend of mine, Rob Hawthorne, who also commentates for Sky, we have a chat on a Monday. Neither of us can remember what we've done. I will have done
Yeah.
Real Madrid, Seville, and he'll have done probably Man United. He might have done the Merseyside derby, and it's like a computer chip. You put it all in your brain, you absorb it all, you splurge it all out when you're commentating,
And then it gone. Then it gone.
and then it's gone. And then it's
Yeah.
gone. And it's quite funny watching the Beckham documentary the other day and seeing the goals and did I comment? Oh yeah, I did that one. And then it comes back, and then you get the feeling of, yeah, I was there and this happened and things trigger. I think Ronaldo, I mean, they were, the Messi hat trick, Messi's debut, original Ronaldo scoring a hat trick as well. I remember him scoring the hat trick at Old Trafford and getting applauded off at Old Trafford. 60,000 Man United fans applauding an opposition player. It's kind of eras, really. I don't think there's any one single game that kind of sticks out in my memory. I mean, I've probably done about 10,000 games now. I've been doing it so long. But it's just everything. It's just those little periods that you go through. The original period when I started doing it was the original Ronaldo, and Figo was coming through, and then the Galactico years. And I've been lucky, for the last decade and a half to be covering Messi and Ronaldo. And now there's a new player coming through. There's Lamine Yamal, who's 16 years of age, who could be the second coming of Lionel Messi at Barcelona. You've got Gavi and you've got Pedri there. You've got Bellingham, and it's really happening. And it's almost like refreshed itself again, and it's a brand new era.
Yeah. And finally on this portion, then, what would you, looking back on all the games that you've done and in Spanish football, who's possibly the best player? Because you've seen so many greats. Who's the one?
Cristiano Ronaldo is the greatest goal scorer, the greatest scorer of goals ever. I mean, he could leap above defenders like nobody else. He had power in his shot like nobody else. It was like a missile when he left his foot. There's hardly any backlift on it at all. He took free kicks. I mean, he didn't have a great free kick actual ratio record, but he was the complete goal scorer, but the complete player for me. That when you're commentating and you're trying to you can normally kind of second guess people's movements when you're commentating, but Messi, you had to be like a defender. You had to be on the game, because it's like trying to, watch or in Spain, trying to watch a blue bottle or a mosquito around the room. 1 second you think you've seen it, and the next it's in the other corner of the room. And with Messi, when you're commentating, it's like that, because he could see things in the game. He'd make a little pass, and then he'd make a run, and then suddenly be on a little bit. So he was something special. He was absolutely extraordinary. So yeah, Ronaldo, greatest goal scorer, Messi, the most amazing player I've ever seen. I think I ever will see.
I don't think anyone can argue. Really.
There will be.
No.
A lot of people will.
Oh, well, this is a good point. We do live in that sort of age. Now, obviously, in your early career, you started off at local radio, and before that in newspapers, didn't you?
I started off in, if you're talking media-wise, excuse me, my mum worked in PR, and I did hospital radio in Hull when I was 14, 15. And that was always the big game plan, was to be a professional footballer, and then Bob Wilson or Gary Lineker, as it is these days. When I'd finished my career in my mid-30s, then I'd go into presenting Match of the Day or maybe commentating on matches. So that was the game plan. I was lucky enough to play professional football. I played for Humberside and had trials for England school, but picked up by Derby County as a kid. So I left school at 16, became a footballer. I was just ahead of my plan, really. It was another story. I went over to America, played in America, and got a scholarship over there to play football, and then did a degree in mass media communications, which allowed me to study radio, TV, newspaper, PR, and play at a very high level of soccer over there. And then when I came back, worked local newspapers, weekly newspaper, and then worked my way up to Radio Humberside. And there was at Radio Humberside one day, a guy called Bill Green, who was the assistant manager, and said, "Are you still playing?" And I says, "Yeah, well, he's still fit." "Why?" He said, "Well, I don't have a reserve keeper. Would you fill in for the reserve?" So I was working for Radio Humberside as a news and sports reporter. And I think I played about a dozen games for Scunny's reserves when I thought my football career and my football days were over. And Radio Humberside were good enough to kind of dart off on a Thursday afternoon to go play at Darlington. We played at West Brom and we played at Birmingham. So, yeah, when I least expected it, I made a little bit of a comeback, and then I played in the FA Cup for a team called Bridlington Town as well. And then obviously as this part of the career, this kind of starts to take off, the football goes on the back burner. So I was slightly ahead of my time. I became a commentator and presenter at the age of about 22, 23 rather than 42.
I mean, I was just reading recently when I was looking into some research on you. In the States, you were breaking records and all sorts.
We did. We had a really good team. I replaced a guy called Nick Sakovic, who went off to play in Germany. I was a goalkeeper. He was a goalkeeper. He was of Polish descent, and he went to play professionally over there. So they wanted to improve the team, and I actually got offered a contract at Peterborough. I went on trial to Peterborough. They needed a young goalkeeper. And then I had another lad who'd been released by Leeds, who was a bit older than me. And they said, look, we're going to offer you a year's contract. It's going to be £85 a week. He's 19, you're 18. He's a bit better than you, a bit taller. But if he gets injured, there's a loss of form, then he'll be, you'll be in the team and you can replace him. And I chose to go to America. The lad's name was David Seaman. So and I was
No way. Oh, that's unbelievable.
David Seaman. He'd been released by Leeds, I think, and I was released by Derby County. We both went on trial, kind of not the same week, but kind of, and they took him on. So we went up to America. We had a really good team. My roommate was like called Juan Carlos Azario, and Juan since went on to coach New York Red Bull, Chicago Fire. I was just trying to check out where he was yesterday, actually. And he coached Mexico in the World Cup before last, coached the team that beat Germany. And I think now, oh my goodness, he's in Egypt. He's coaching a team in Egypt. Yeah, so yeah, we had a really good team, and I had my own goalkeeping coach. We had 2 physios. We're actually more professional than Derby County, and this was just a college team in Connecticut. So yeah, I wasn't sure I went there basically, if I'm honest, to get a visa to get in the country and maybe go have trials at clubs and do a bit of coaching, and then I got immersed into the education, which kind of cast aside when I was back at home.
How did you find the cultural side of living in America? Was it easy to transition? Did you have any sort of like problems early on living there, or because it is very different when you move countries, isn't it?
Yeah, it was difficult because if I'm honest, I was broke. I'd been a footballer, and for 6 months, you're too young to remember this, but Norman Tebbit and the Tory party at that point said, if you want a job, get on your bike. You're not necessarily going to get a job in your town. So I went to the job centre in Hull and said, I need some help here. I've got some trials. I've written to all the clubs, got 4 or 5 trials offered to me, and I need to get to Birmingham, Leyton Orient, Peterborough, Cambridge, and they're all within a week. So it's like a job interview, really. So I need some bus or train expenses, and they laughed at me. And so I got the legislation out. I said, no, this is what they're saying. So I actually got the job centre to pay for me to go for about 7 or 8 trials at clubs. So when I went to America, Mum and Dad saved up, did everything. I did gardening, I did driving, I did anything I could to raise a bit of money. And I literally got a one-way ticket. So I worked as a valet parker, parking cars in a posh restaurant in Stamford, Connecticut. I did coaching at the weekend. And basically earned enough to get home at Christmas, and then did enough between Christmas and New Year back home to get back to America. So yeah, I was. It's funny. I went back to a place called New Haven a few years ago, and it's a beautiful little town. It's where Yale is, and we went back with some friends of ours, and I'd never been to any of the restaurants or the posh places downtown.
Food's supposed to be great over there, I've heard. A lot of the places.
It's New England is absolutely beautiful, especially this time of year in autumn. It's a gorgeous place. And we were lucky. We were playing most of our games along that coast in New England, in Boston, Hampshire, or Maine, or down to New York. And then if we got to the finals, we'll be playing in Florida, which we did 2 years. And it was 1 year almost played in Seattle as well. So we got to see a lot of the world. It's just that I couldn't really afford to go eat or drink anywhere.
So when you got your chance to get your foot in the door in terms of opportunities and TV, didn't that come because John Watson pulled out of presenting a feature for Match of the Day or the FA Cup special?
Yeah. Again, I was
while he was playing non-league.
I was already again just a chance. I was already a Humberside, and Colin Appleton, who had been the Hull City manager,
that's right. Yeah,
games at Hull. I played some games at Hull City Reserves when he was manager, so he knew me, I knew him, and I went to interview him as the new manager of Bridlington Town. They had a mad guy in charge called Ken Richardson. He'd saved the club from extinction. So I went to do the story for Radio Humberside, and again, Colin said, "What are you doing?" I said, "What did I got into this?" And he said, "Same thing. Have you got your gloves?" And he said, "My goalkeeper has just been suspended for 8 games for headbutting a linesman, as you would. You get suspended for that." So he said, "Would you fill in?" So I filled in, and it was early part of the season. And they were in the FA Cup. So we went up and we played a team called Cleaton Celtic, the northernmost team in the FA Cup that season. And then we won. And then they followed us. So John Motson came and he did the Cleaton game. But the second game, they didn't have a reporter. So they rang me up and said, who are the various characters? What's your chairman like of the players? As you do a bit of journalistic research, who are they going to feature on? And I said, who's your reporter? And they said, we don't have anybody because it was the Seoul Olympics. So I said, well, I'll do it as a freelance. So they said, yeah. So I ended up doing the goalkeeper and the reporting. And it went to a third replay. That's how long ago it was. And by the third replay, the other keeper had served his suspension. So part of the drama of the piece was Colin sitting down when I knew what was coming. It's all staged, but sit me down and say, look, son, you've done well. You've let me 3 goals in 8 matches, but Gary Cox is back. So he's back in goal. And, your little adventure here is over, which was great television. It was a lovely way to finish it. But he went on Football Focus, and it was about an 8-minute feature when Football Focus was good. It was an 8-minute feature. And Des Lynam finished it off by saying, watch out, Bob Wilson, here's your successor. So whenever I went for a job, I was 23, 24 at the time. So whenever I went for a job after that, you'd have your written CV, but I'd just have a look at this VHS and it gives you an idea of what I could do. So the fact I was working at Radio Humberside and I'd just been given this incredible opportunity to showcase my talents with great production behind me. I just put my voice on it really and performed to the camera. But I learned from the cameraman and the assistant producers, associate producers around me what to do, and went down and edited it in London. So this wonderful kind of fast streamed education in television. So yeah, so that was kind of my break really, and that was the turning point between somebody who still had ambitions at the age of 23 to maybe make it as a footballer, to then realise that I'd maybe got a step ahead of the others by kind of getting this incredible break on BBC.
That's a great story. Now, was there anyone around this time then that before you did the piece and all that took you aside for one moment and gave you some like words of wisdom? Don't do this, don't do that, do that, don't worry.
Kind of. Yeah, funnily enough, going back, as a journalist, and again, not people you would know, I work for a news agency, so we did, an agency covers news and sport in a particular area for the national newspaper. So I worked in Stoke, so Monday to Friday, I covered court cases, deaths,
Wow.
murders, whatever, poisonings, and we did inquests, and so Monday to Friday we did that, and then Saturday we went and we reported in either Port Vale or Stoke, alternate weekends. And we do that for the Express and Star in Wolverhampton. The opposing team, say it was Plymouth Argyle, we'd do it for the newspapers and the radio stations down in the south of the country. There's a great guy called Ian Bailey who's now a lecturer at Staffordshire University. He's actually tutoring footballers that want to get into the media. So he was great with me. And, some of the things I'd learned in America, I had to unlearn over here as well. And then I had to get into, essential media law and digest that. And then I remember one day, Graham Taylor, who, again, we get to England managers, another man that at times was derided, but was an incredible human being and a wonderful man. My first ever interview was for him for a company called Club Call, which now everybody looks on the internet. But when you were kids, you used to ring this number up. Pay 25p and you get a match report or listen to the manager of your football club. So I think I was doing it for Aston Villa's Club Call, and he sat me down, and that was we restarted the interview and we did it. So little things that you remember that you go back like that. So yeah, it was. And then I worked for a Signal Radio, which was freelance shifts there, which is a radio station in Stoke, and a guy called John Anderson who now works for, I don't know who works for now, and a guy called George Andrews who sadly passed away a couple of weeks ago, who worked for Radio Stoke and Signal Radio. And every area has that kind of Alan Partridge type character, and George was pre-Partridge. He was brilliant, but again, he taught you things and how to deal with people. So yeah, it's all little stepping stones, and you're learning from people on as you progress in this career.
How did you find the transition then, Rob, from playing football both here and in the States, then to go into a career in media? Because obviously now like you say, there's courses to help footballers go into media and stuff. But I'm guessing back then there wasn't really that much in terms of courses of that type. How
Believe
did
it
you
or
find?
not, yeah, believe it or not now, most kids do media at school, and it's the easy option sometimes when you want to go off and do a degree or do a media degree. That's going to be fun. But back then, I'm showing my age now, back then there was no such thing in this country as a media degree. You could do a degree and then you could go do a kind of a 2-year conversion course. I think there were only two, might be in Leeds and Cardiff, to do your NCTJs to become an accredited journalist. So I came back with this unique degree. I'd done a 4-year degree at a college in America, which covered all of the bases: newspapers, radio, TV, public relations. I edit, I could film, I could broadcast, I could launch a press release, which is stuff that you kind of don't well, you would learn at college, and there's lots of great courses over here. But back then you couldn't. So it took a bit of convincing when you were writing jobs. And I needed a break. Some guy that had seen me at Derby County that gave me a chance at a local newspaper, and then I proved myself. So it's quite funny because back then a lot of people saw me as this footballer. There's a lot of them now coming through in the media, but I was seen as a footballer, which gave me a little bit of the credibility. So when I got in there, I could kind of speak their language. Now I'm so old that nobody even remembers that I played football. Occasionally, very occasionally.
You're not that old.
You'd be surprised.
I mean, because obviously, like you say now, there is a lot of footballers that make the transition and or whatnot. But is there anything that you can look back now that you would go, this is what I would tell the younger self, the younger me, knowing what you know now after a long career?
Do you know, it's a good question. Now, my son's, at least he's 29 now, and he's kind of following in the family traditions, but he's working in news. Every generation, it's like a computer. Every generation is an upgrade. So
Yeah.
I did sport. He's doing world news. So there we go. So I give him a lot of advice, and not really. In the early days, it was a case of being patient, which is saying to him at the moment as well, in that you're always you're seeing somebody else progressing and they get the job, and you think, why has he got the job and I've not? So it's probably, if I just go back, I'd just put a hand on my shoulder and say, be patient, because in 2 years' time this opportunity will come, which it did. And then Sky came along, and it's probably just maybe a frustration thing as well. When Sky first started and I wanted to commentate, Sky Sports News was there, and I don't think there's anything I'd go back and do differently. It's just been everything has been slightly ahead of the game. You're always going to look at the bigger picture, see what's happening, and then kind of evolve with the media landscape.
How long do you think it took you to really feel like you was in the groove as a commentator, as a presenter, a broadcaster?
Oh, that's a very good question. It's really hard. It's a really, really good question. I don't think you ever feel that you're at ease. I mean, I'm preparing now for a game this weekend, and I think I've got all bases covered. And I've got to that point where I take a break to talk to you, and then I'm thinking, right, I need to double check that, and I need to check that. Like tomorrow, it's Real Madrid playing Seville, so Sergio Ramos is playing Real Madrid for the first time. Just hit me. I don't know when was the last time he would have played against Real Madrid. So I need to check that, how many red cards he's had. I think it's 26. Need to go back and double check. So you never feel you're completely on top of it. So the longer you go, the more experienced you become, the greater the preparation that you put in, and maybe the less the other distractions are as well. So I don't think you ever think you cracked it, but I've got to the point now where I'm not phased, and I don't think I get nervous by doing anything. My biggest challenge every year, I do football 99% of the time, and then one day a year I do 5.5 hours of live fishing, presenting, anchoring the fishing. And I think if I can do 5.5 hours of a sport I know absolutely nothing about, then I can do anything. But it's the same disciplines, and I'm normally out here in Spain and then come back to do the fishing because it's in the middle of the summer. But I apply everything to that. I find out who the anglers are, where they've come from, how they've qualified, what their family is, what their background is, what they've won before. Build up the picture. So if you go in and you've got that knowledge, then you're 75% of the way there.
So you've gone from starting out fishing for stories to being involved in a fishing show.
Hey, yes, exactly. I like that. Yes. Yeah, you go angling for lines.
That's right. That's right.
I've been doing it 20 odd years. Sorry. Yeah, the face of fishing, or as we say, fish face. Yeah, it's just roll on.
Now, do you think if you was to write a book and there was a chapter on secrets of your success, is there any? Or is it just hard work, preparation, and repetition?
Well, that's a good point. Well, I would say probably, I don't know if I've necessarily been successful, but I've stuck it out when others have come and gone. I'd just say, just keep a standard, set a standard. Don't get overly ambitious. Don't get overly frustrated as well. When you might be working for one company and another company comes up and they set up and they'll go and they'll take the talent. You say, why is that not me? And then you'll see it seen at Sky a number of times that people go from the leave Sky and they'll head off to this new fledgling company, and it lasts 2 or 3 years, and then they're wanting to come back at Sky. So it's just been this recognizing where you stand or where you sit on the media landscape. Everybody would want to be Martin Tyler, but I probably learned very early on that I wasn't going to be the number one commentator at Sky, I'm the number 2 commentator at Sky. But then again, I got my little niche, which was doing Spanish football. And I absolutely love doing that with the other guys, the likes of Ian Crocker and Guy Havard, and especially Kevin Keatings, who did it for a long time as well. And that was our niche. And then realizing that I maybe had a talent at doing reports for Soccer Saturday, being able to go out, do an interview, tell a story, and create a package for the Soccer Saturday show, which again became my stock in trade for probably a decade and a half as well. And realizing that that's what they rated me doing. I might have wanted to, I did present it once in the absence of Jeff Stelling, but realizing that you're not going to be Jeff Stelling, and that this is your USP, this is your unique selling point. So that'd be my, probably my best advice to people. Don't get above your station, but realize your worth at the same time.
Obviously, you've been at Sky for many, many years now. I think you started there in '95, didn't you? What's been the biggest changes you've seen at Sky Sports in that time? Because you must have seen a lot.
Probably the biggest changes have been in the last 2 or 3 years. We started with a blank sheet of paper when a great guy called Vic Wakeling had got the live sports on Sky, and I think probably only had one channel then, and he wanted to create this 24-hour-a-day sports news channel. And for the first maybe 3 or 4 years, they just celebrated 25 years of Sky Sports News. 3 or 4 years, it was 2 bulletins a day. It was 6 o'clock and then 10 o'clock. So you were working like the news on the BBC or ITV News at 10. You were working to those. In fact, they took the editor from News at 10, and he started and didn't have any reporters at that point outside of London. So they took me on in the Northwest, big Rob McCaffrey to do the Northeast. We covered virtually everything out of London. Then they took on the Midlands, then they took on the Northeast, then they brought a Scotland guy in. And they, they expanded it that way. And there was this great expansion. Of course, as things have gone on, it's now more than the television audience. It's all social media and multimedia, and how you, as you say, get things on YouTube, how you get things on Twitter and threads and whatever the next thing is. And you kind of got to evolve with it as well. I think in the lockdown, we went from having everything had to be in super HD and everything had to be pristine to everything being now accepted that, you can do it on Zoom, and people aren't that worried about everything being pristine condition. And that there's a big change that they're looking to cater for this mythical 18 to 32, 35-year-old audience, because they think that is the future. And there's a lot of people out there creating shows at the moment to try to bring this audience in. So that has been the biggest change over the last 2 or 3 years, that there's been a big sway in how things are done, especially in the television area.
Do you have any pre-game rituals or superstitions that you've just had for years that you still have?
Oh, that's a great question. When I do the Spanish, I've never said this before, actually. When I do the Spanish, when we first started doing Spanish football on Sky, they used to have you go to the ad break, and it used to say Fútbol Español in association con Cerveza Sol, Spanish football in association with Sol beer. And that was like our sponsor. But I think it might have been Ian Crocker. Somebody had to do it. So I started practicing my Spanish, Fútbol Español in association con Cerveza Sol. So now whenever I get asked to do a voice check, they'll say, could we have a bit of level, please? And normally we'll be talking, our normal recording level will be like this. But when you do a football commentary, well, they just started cutting the grass up. So when you do a football commentary, you have to raise your voice. So this is my voice now, which is probably about 3. And they say, could we have a bit of level? And I will always go, Fútbol Español in association con Cerveza Sol. And it blows the headphones off. I hope I've not blown your headphones off, but that blows.
No, it's good.
So that is my unique, So I sit with Stuart Robson. I've been working with the 2 seasons now. He's only just remembered that I do that every time. When they go, cover voice check, please, count to 10 or something. And I go, yeah, here we go. Fútbol Español in association. So that's my ritual. That's about it, really. Just ensuring that I've got everything. Here's my notes for tomorrow, that everything is laid out, that I've got my tick. In fact, this is my notes for next week. I'm doing Swansea against Swansea, and that's Sheriff Tiraspol. So I've got my notes laid out. Everything is ready. Everything is there. I've got my coloured pens. My pens are ready. I was watching somebody recently say that OCD is a bad thing, but OCD is an absolute necessity when you're commentating. So yeah, everything has to be in place.
You just made me think of something there. How long does it take you to? Do you have to rehearse some of the names of the players? Have you ever had a
Um,
moment when you've been on a broadcast where you take a sort of running jump at a very tricky name to say in the moment?
Again, preparation is everything. I'm just looking now at Sheriff Tiraspol, who I'm doing on Thursday night against Servette. I did them a couple of weeks ago. They got 25 foreign players. Sheriff Tiraspol, Koval, Garanaga, Ricardinho, Talal, Kiki, here's one, Mbekeli, and Bekele, Zuhuri, Tavar, Artan Dunga, Edemo, Lovano. So you learn to sight read names and to learn when you're doing countries that, if you're in Spain, you automatically go, it's David, it's not going to be David. But if you see an English or a Welsh name, it's going to be David, not David. The one that sends us all mad is Luca Dean, who plays for Aston Villa. That I've heard Digne, and actually tracked him down and put it on social media. And I said, come on, we've all got a different pronunciation. So my name is Luca Dean. So we've now got a commentators group. My best friend Rob Hawthorne still claims that he hears Luca Digne, and he's he's a Villa fan. He's from Birmingham, and he hears differently, but it's just different pronunciations, but getting them right as well. And for the Premier League, it's great. There is actually a site where you can go on, and every player in the Premier League says their name to the camera, and they say it twice, and then you listen to it and take it down phonetically, however you want to do it. The Spanish football does it the same as well. They're not don't get the players, but they get a native speaker of that country. It might be Slovakia. It might be, Bellingham, Jude Bellingham. How do you say? No, Bellingham. So I've not heard the Spanish say it quite like that yet. So they will do it, and then we got one of our commentators. When they say Bruno Fernandes, he does the FIFA games. One of our commentators, apparently he pronounces it Bruno Fernandes, which you've never heard an English commentator. So then you've got to make that decision. Do I go Fernandes or do I go Fernandes, as most of us would say? Phil Jagielka used to be, is it a Croatian name? Jagielka. And he's
Okay.
And his daughter once said, Daddy, why do they call you Jagielka on the television? He said, that's because it's my stage name.
That's good.
He's a Yorkshire guy from Sheffield. He answers to Jags or Jagielka, but his parents are the Jagielkas. So everything is preparation.
I never knew that.
You can't just rock up and do it, really. That is the most difficult thing. You can't just turn up and do it, because you do a game like I'm doing Tuesday night, and I'm doing EFL games. I've got Swansea, Huddersfield, and you're basically on those, you're broadcasting to the Swansea and Huddersfield fans. It's not like a wider audience, really. If they're tuning to the red button, they're fans of that team. So you've got to I listen to the local radio stations, what they're saying on BBC Radio Wales, what they're saying on Radio Leeds for Huddersfield. And I listen to their guys, so you get a feel of what the fans are saying. Because this guy's brilliant, it's fantastic, and he might be the one that that they completely disregarded, or he's done something to disrespect the fans or whatever. And also you get your pronunciations from there. So I'm very keen on listening to how the local radio guys who have done their due diligence do it as well. And this week Sheriff Tiraspol against Servette, I will go onto YouTube. I'll hopefully get a chance to talk to their media guys and just say, can you send me a voice note of your players 1 to 25? Just read the name out once, and then I'll go through it. So rock up and do it. You're going to be in trouble. Do the work. Something happens, and you know what that eventuality is. If it's Jude Bellingham scores tomorrow night, then it's going to be 11 goals in 11 matches, and he scored for England this week as well. They did that before his last 4 games last year for Dortmund. So it's doing it, building blocks.
What do you think, Rob, makes the perfect commentator? Having done it for so long yourself, if you're going to sit and watch a game, it's the things that you listen out for. You go, oh, I know what he's done there. I've done that slightly different, or I know somebody that would do things a slightly different way.
A really good pal of mine is a presenter, and he's doing some tennis commentary in a couple of weeks, and he said the same thing to me. I do a lot of commentary. I said, well, less is more. If you don't have anything to say nothing. There's nothing worse than listening to a commentary, and this is what happens sometimes with the younger commentators. They want to impress, and they want to show you that they've signed 12 players, 6 of them are on loan, and 25 and show how much work they've done. And you just have to just drop things in. The picture's the most important. People watch television. So if you're doing a TV commentary, you're complementing the pictures. You will say, who have we got? Ricardinho. He's a 34-year-old. Say he scores, he has a chance. Well, some player, this is his 13th club. He's travelled around Europe. He likes it here. It's his second spell. leave it there. But then you don't have to go, well, in his first spell, he scored 7 goals and 3 assists. And anyway, they go, no, I've got all of that. But, you know, he's familiar to the fans. They love him so much here. He's come back for a second time. But, you know, he's been at 13 clubs, but it's the only one he's been to twice. So it's just little things like that, and knowing just a little line on everybody, and not saturating the commentary with too many words and trying to be too clever and show how much work you've done. And sometimes I go to games and I listen, you know, I listen to fans. I'm a fan. We're all fans. And I say, what do you think? And were you watching that? Oh God, the commentator never shut up. He just kept it up. And it's like, but if they remember, you say something and they remember it, you go, oh yeah, I've got through there, because there's been a lot of noise and a lot of words, and you've just come up with something that somebody will remember.
It's interesting you say that, because even at sort of my relatively low level, one of the things that I learned relatively early on doing interviews is you start off and you want to make a good impression, don't you? And you like you say, you do tend to have at least a spell in the early stages where you may say too much, or you might ruin the flow of the interview and things like that. To a certain extent, that only really comes from repetition, just learning as you go, doesn't it?
Yeah, it comes from experience and well, making mistakes. The more mistakes you make, the more you rectify those mistakes, as long as the mistake doesn't become a flaw. But if you do it every time, it's a mistake, and you realise you've made that mistake, you won't do it again. It's a chat I've had with my lad this week, who had a difficult news bulletin the other night. But I said, if you learn that went wrong, then next time that happens, you will do this, and you'll learn what to do next time. I mean, and again, it's experience. You know, I won't give the name away, but I used to go interview Alex Ferguson a lot, and you would have to listen to what Ferguson was saying, because you could ask him about one thing and he would talk about something else. He would have an agenda. It's almost like a party political broadcast. And then you would have to react. You go there with 3 areas that you would want to get to, but he would then give you something that he would want to get over. And then you had to listen, and you'd have to get him to embellish and say, really, tell me more. And then you get out of it. And then but how does that work? Or and then you get him to just give you another line on it. And there's one of the guys who he was an experienced presenter, and he went up to do the star interview with Fergie, and Fergie said, do you know what? It's come the end of the season, I'm retiring, and this will be the end of it. And the guy wasn't listening to what Alex Ferguson had said, looked down at his next question and asked him, so this weekend you're playing against Aston Villa. And Alex Ferguson had just told him that he was retiring at the end of the season, but he hadn't listened. And the more interviews I do, I can tell now when people are lying, embellishing, hiding the truth. I can tell by the body language. I can tell by the way, you know, where their eyes go, if they're looking up or they're looking down. Footballers, you see how many interviews you see where they're twitching their ear, or they look at, they can't bear to look in the eyes. Because I've done it for so long, I can look and I go, is that right though? Catch their eyes again. So it comes down to experience, and it comes down to not speaking as I'm doing now. Speaking this, I'm not used to this, me speaking. I'm used to asking other people and going, well, tell me a bit more about that, and how does that work? So yeah, that's the key. But you learn from experience. You like anything, you learn by doing. It's like driving a car, you learn by doing.
For your career, then, you must have had some pretty funny stories that you've either seen or been involved in. Is there any that stand out?
Oh dear! I played this game the other day. I was playing golf, and I said, "Give me a name or give me a club, and I'll give you a story. And I'll give you something about them." I don't know. I suppose the one that's topical is David Beckham when he was at Manchester United, as it's topical. And they kind of alluded to this on the documentary as well. That, you know, he started wearing poshest sarong, and he was getting a lot of stick in the newspapers. And he went on Big Breakfast one day to say, oh, she said, Victoria said that David occasionally liked to wear her thong under the sarong, which became a headline in the newspaper. United back then, they'd pulled out the FA Cup to go play the World Club Championship in Australia, and I'd been asked to go do a big PR thing at Man United's training ground, on this fantastic state-of-the-art training ground, and an unveiling. An HR health and safety guy took us around. Can't do that. And I said, this just isn't good television. You know, we're not being able to film anywhere. And the guy nipped off for a minute. So I said to my cameraman, okay, film now, bearing in mind what I've just talked about, Posh being on the TV, the thong under the sarong. I said, film. So long gone are the days where you come into the Manchester United training ground and they'd have a peg at the wall and your feet would stick to the tiles. You come in now, it's beautiful, lush carpet. Each player's got a mahogany locker with a digital code. In fact, I could be sitting where David Beckham sits every day. As I open the door, hanging up in the changing locker was a thong Now, I ran it by Sky and I said, look, United won't like that. Just pull it. Oh, I said, no, they'll think it's hilarious. And they didn't. So Fergie, upon his kind of returning to the country, got to hear about this. So not only was Sky banned, I was banned, and Fergie kind of blew his top, which was a great well, but he wishes to do that occasionally so he could control kind of the media. And then I had to ring him up about March time. I was heading up to the northeast, and his secretary rang and said, the boss wants to talk to you. So the days before mobiles were really reliable. So I pulled into a little chef. I got about £20 in £1 coins, fed them in, and he said, we got to see for yourself. And so if you're looking for an apology, I'm not going to apologise, but I will say, and I've heard you use this phrase a lot, Sir Alex, that I made an error of judgment. I wouldn't make a game put in that situation. Okay. He said, son, you're back in. He said, however, you were dining at the captain's table, and now you're rowing down below with the rest of the bub.
Great.
So I was back in, and I got back in next day. He said, how long's this interview going to be? And I said, well, I'll give you, you give me 2 or 3 good answers and I'll be out of here. And he went, well, how long's that? And I said, well, I'll ask you 3 questions. If you give me good answers, I'll be out of here. But, if you straight back them, then, I'll have to, he's never learned. So, yeah. So that's just a Fergie story.
That's a great one. Really is. Now, over your career, you've interviewed many managers, many players. Is there any particular interview that stands out for one reason or another you can think of?
Do you know what? The one I enjoyed the most was David Moyes, who could be quite prickly. And I knew David. He was actually at Cambridge when I went on trial at Cambridge, a couple of years older than me. And I think we might have played in the reserve games together. And then I got to know him when he was at Preston. I was at Sky, and then he came to Everton. So I was there from day one at Everton, and he actually came in on the Sunday, goals on Sunday, on either the first or second weekend as Everton manager. So we sat down and had a drink. But as the years kind of progressed at Everton, he became a little bit more prickly with the media and a bit shorter and sharper. But they did a handpick. I think it was me and Juliet Farrington from the BBC were asked to go big sit-down interviews with him. And I was able to ask him absolutely anything I wanted. And he was really, really frank. And it was probably the best interview I've ever done. It was absolutely brilliant. No, tell me about when you came into Everton, were you ready? So we went back to day one, and then his relationship with Bill Kenwright, who was the chairman. And he said about Bill, he came in and he thought he was a bit of a lover. He'd been in Coronation Street, and Bill's a bit flamboyant, and David's a gruff Scot. And he said he took him to a West End show, which was having its press night. And Kenwright went behind the scenes, took David there and said to the cast, look, you're off cue. You missed this, you missed that. And he said he almost gave the cast the team talk. He said, if we don't get this right tonight on press night, we're out of it. This show's going to die in the West End. You're all going to be out of work. And he said he suddenly realised that Bill Kenwright, being the 30 impresario, was not necessarily different to being the team manager of Everton Football Club. And he said and then he told how he'd spend money the number of times that they wanted him to spend money, and he treated the club's money like his. So it was just a really good insight into an interview, and it was, it's the one that stands out. We did Bobby Robson. We've interviewed everybody. I used to go to interview Alex Ferguson for Man U TV. We did all the media for the club. I have to go interview him at 7:30 on a Tuesday morning. There's nothing more scary than an unshaven Sir Alex Ferguson over a cup of coffee when he's just got out of bed.
I can imagine that being true, yeah. Do you think, though, on David Moyes, that he's ever really got the sort of universal respect from the paying public that he should have done? Because you look at the jobs that he's done, generally speaking, at the places he's been, he's always done fairly well, with the exception of United, which was in a state of flux anyway as a club. Do you think that he's got the accolades he deserves in the long run?
I think at the time at Everton, they recognised what he'd done, and he got the club and he got the people. United, I think he was destined to go to United. He should have gone as Fergie. Again, this was part of the interview that we did with him. He told us how Alex Ferguson had called him up one day and offered him the first team coach's job. And they'd actually had a glass of whiskey and shaken hands on it. And he said he didn't hear anything from Fergie. And then next thing he hears in the media is that Steve McLaren's been appointed, which is a really kind of honest thing to tell me. And this was, I guess, a couple of, maybe not so long after that, he got the job at Manchester United. But his personality changed when he went to United. He went from driving a nice car or a 4x4 to suddenly kind of being in charge of a juggernaut. And he had, when you go to United, there's so much noise. You can see it with Ten Hag and so many people around you and so many departments. And the great thing about Fergie is that he was able to delegate. We sat in his office once with Fergie, and he had 8 windows. It was like a James Bond movie. He could open a window and see the pool room. He could see the youths over there. He'd open it and see the first team here, see the reserves there. And he could just open whichever window in his office he wanted to see. And Moyes went into that from basically porter cabin at Everton's training ground. And he was, at that time, too big for him. And I also think Fergie had taken an old bunch of players slightly too far and left nothing behind for David Moyes to work with. It took him a while to find himself. He didn't do well at Sunderland. He did okay when he went to Spain. He used to speak to him on a regular basis when he was at Real Sociedad. And that was a learning curve for him. And I think West Ham, he's found his level again. And he's in a club where when he speaks, people listen rather than being lots of voices around him. So I think it's taken a while for West Ham to fully appreciate it, and they've got this fantastic stadium, and they're playing European competition. But the fact that they won a trophy last year and they went on an adventure, I think he's finally won the fans over there, and they realise that he's not going to go out and sign 60, 70, 80 million pound players, but he's going to be the master of finding players for 20, 25 million, giving them a little shine and taking them on to the next level, which is what he did at Everton for many years.
And of course, he signed the marvellous Jarrod Bowen from my beloved Hull City.
Yes.
Which I'm going to say it now. I think that might be the signing of the last 5 or 10 years for when you consider in the industry as a whole that football is. You don't really see that many teams taking a chance on a lower league player anymore. So the fact that David Moyes, because he's always been pretty good at identifying up and coming players from when he was his Everton days, the fact that he's had the belief in him, he could see where his potential, and you look at the fee he paid, you look back now and you think that's an absolute snip, that's a bargain, really.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's his stock in trade. That's what he kind of did at Everton. He took the likes of Tim Cahill,
That's right.
Jack Rodwell, I guess Tim Howard, players that people thought were good at other clubs, brought them in, gave them, nurtured them, took time, and then took them to another level. He's done that, but we all knew at Hull City that. But Jarrod Bowen was a great player. He wasn't going to go straight into a Premier League team, but he probably had fans quicker than any of us imagined. And he's had patience with them, and he might be ready now to go to the absolute next level. But he's signed the likes of, is it Sofal and Souček, the 2 Czech players that came in there as well, players that were good at their level, brought them in, had the patience, had the time, had the belief. And that's his kind of, we talk about unique selling point. That's his unique selling point as a coach. And he's a tough man, but he's a great man manager. And if he believes in you, then you're going to feel that you've won this guy over. That's very hard to impress. But that's what he's done. And Bowen's a great case, and let's hope that Keane Lewis Potter as well down at Brentford follows his path.
Born and raised in Hull. What was that like when you sort of growing up and your formative years? Was who introduced you to football and got you involved? Was it your dad or was it your brother?
Yeah, Dad took me to the Hull City games from the age of 4, I guess. And I got my first season ticket at Boothby Park when I was 5 in the main stand. And I used to go under the main stand and collect the autographs from the age of 6. Had a great time.
I love the old ground, Rob, because I started going in 97-ish.
God.
And when I was 7 or 8 years old,
Yeah.
I had that spell that a lot of kids do where they get the different kits most years because they're swaying which team do I want to go support now. But then I thought to myself, right, I might as well go support my local team. At the time, they were in the bottom league, fighting relegation. They wasn't sure whether it was going to survive from season to season. But looking back now, I think the fact that I did that and I didn't go and just support the Man U's and stuff, I've got a greater appreciation for the success that I've witnessed.
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes me laugh now. They do brilliantly, and they're selling out, and social media, people jumping on the bandwagon. But when I was a kid, you were bullied for supporting Hull City. Most of the kids in our playground back then were supporting Leeds United. Not many Man United because they were on the way down. Liverpool were probably my second team back then, and ironically, I moved to Liverpool and covered their games for many years as well. But I was certainly there as a fan. I signed for Derby when I was 14, 15, and I wrote to City. Ken Houghton, bless him, he's had his birthday this week. I wrote to them when I was 11, they came to see me play, and I trained there every Tuesday and Thursday night from the age of 11 to 15 until Derby County came in and offered me an apprenticeship. So my uncle was one of the chief stewards in the South Stand. So I literally did know every nook and cranny of the stadium. And, doing what I do now, I devoured the programme. Me and my mate Mike Milner were the first ones into the stand, the old North Stand under the clock. We were the first ones into the ground every week. And then with my uncle at the other end, we used to be in there early, and then when my dad took me to the games, we'd be the last ones out because we're asking for autographs. I just found Bill Shankly's autograph when we cleared out some stuff during COVID. So it's amazing. I'd forgotten that Bill Shankly signed an autograph for me back in the day. So yeah, it's amazing. So yes, Hull City is my team, and live those days. I kind of lost touch with them from a while when I was about 15, but then when I was 18, 19 and trained when they were really, really on the up, because when Don Robinson came in and went in, I was said on trial, they basically took me in to make up the numbers because they only had about 13, 14 pros. And I've been released by Derby. They had the great Tony Norman, best keeper the club's ever had. John Davis is number 2, so I trained with those lads as a keeper. Well, I'd end up playing left back and marking Brian Marwood in the training ground just to make up the numbers with them. But again, I actually came in when I left Derby. I acquired a number of pair of boots because we were sponsored by Patrick. So when the players had finished with the boots, they threw them away. They only wear them a couple of times. And the physio said, rather than put them in the bin, take them with you. And then when I went to Hull City, the players had to buy their own boots, wash their own kit. And Steve McLaren actually played a season in boots that I'd acquired from Derby County, pair of the Patrick Keegan's.
A lot of people forget that Steve McLaren used to play for City, don't they, as well?
One of the best players we ever had. You talk about Beckham now, Steve McLaren had every attribute that David Beckham had. He was a magnificent player. Engine on him, ran, could make a pass, was absolutely... He and Brian Marwood went on to make it. Sadly, when Steve McLaren moved on, he got a horrible injury and went off into coaching. But no, he was Steve McLaren. Ask anybody from that era, he was one incredible player. He would be a Premier League player now had he not got onto a Premier League player, had he not got the nasty injuries that he got in his career.
Yeah, absolutely. From everything I've heard about him, he was a bit before my time, but from everyone I've heard, people talk about him, he seemed like a hell of a player.
Oh, absolutely.
See, my dad started taking me, as I say, when I was 7 or 8. And my dad used to be trawlerman, and he told me some years ago a story that is related to Hull City, but it just blew my mind because he used to play sort of in the Saturday, Sunday leagues and like semi-pro levels, and he got offered the chance in, I would guess, 60s, I'm guessing, early 70s, to play for City as a striker. Because in them days, it was a bit different to how it is now. But he turned him down because at the time he was going fishing out to the North Sea for weeks at a time, and he was like, "I'm earning more money where I am." Yeah. I said to him, "What are you doing? What did you think, Dad? I mean, you could have been potentially on your way to sort of been widely recognised if you'd given it a go." And he went, "Well, it was just more money at the time."
Yeah, I think if you remember John Hawley, I think John Hawley, when they signed him, he was an amateur. I think he worked in the family antique business most of the days of the week, and then trained 2 or 3 days, and then scored goals for City on the week, and then eventually got a move to Arsenal and played for Leeds United. So back in those days, it wasn't actually unheard of because they had a limited number of pros. Now they've got a squad of, looking at my prep, 25 players, 28 players. A lot more than that at the Premier League clubs with the youth players and whatever. But then they probably used 12 or 13 players during the whole season. And then, like your dad, they'd have local guys that would come in and make up the numbers and get a little bit of money to play for the resis and maybe make the bench. But yeah, it wasn't unheard of for people like your dad to be on the periphery of it. But you either went, if you had a trade or you had a good job, you went that way because that was going to last you a long time.
I said a few minutes ago about how much I loved the old ground as well, so much. And one of the reasons I think is because there's 2 things really that stick out in my mind. I remember when I was 8 or 9 years old, or maybe I was 10, but Adam Pearson had come from Leeds and he'd bought the club, saved it from going out of business, and then essentially started the rocket that sent us up the leagues. I remember being under the main stand. For people listening to this who've never went to any of the old grounds, that weren't as glamorous in my day anyway, because the Boothry Park was way past its prime at the time. But underneath the main stand, as you know, Rob, it was very narrow. It was the changing rooms would often come out right where the fans would be going past. And I remember, and it's always stuck out in my mind because I thought, right, do you know what? He didn't have to do this, but he literally stood there, and we had a 5, 10 minute chat, me and my dad. Now, that's something quite small, but when you look how far football has moved on, better and some worse, depending on your perspective. Like, how often can you say that the chairman of your club will take the time, 5, 10 minutes, and chat to you and just talk about whatever was topical at the time?
Yeah, I guess the further up the league you go, up the pyramid you go, the less personal it becomes. I mean, there's a great quote. One of the if I'm quite close to Tranmere Rovers because that's my local club where I'm leaving now. Um,
And Nigel Atkins is there now, isn't he, as well?
Nigel's back there, yeah. Nigel's there as well. And again, it goes
Love
for
Nigel.
yeah. I did my coaching badges with Nigel when he was finishing playing. He went on to manage my team, Hull City, and now he's back. Kind of, I think he's a caretaker manager officially. But they said they had a press officer at Tranmere Rovers to try to engage the public to get people in, or get to the bigger clubs. The PR people are there to actually keep people out of the clubs, and you kind of. As you move up, you're trying to get people in. And Tranmere is a great club like that. The Palioses, they're a local family who've done well, and they bring people in. They've always got time for a chat for absolutely everybody. But no doubt if they got to the Championship, there'd be more noise and more people wanting to talk to them, that they have to kind of then create a barrier between themselves. But that's the thing that has sadly changed in my time in football, that, you know, so like yourself, when I was at Hull, I would literally stand outside the changing room door. You could smell the changing room. You could smell
Yeah.
this open, the players would come out and you would grab them there and then, and they give you 30 seconds of their time. Even at Liverpool, when I first went to Liverpool, people would be at the training ground. They'd come into the car park, they'd wait by the cars, they'd come and sign the autographs. Everton the same. Manchester United, again, great David Beckham story. Beckham came out one day when he just got to the height of his fame. It was school holidays. There must have been 100 kids there with autograph books. And the guy went, "Oh, David's got to go." And he said, "No, I've been in their situation." And he went and he said, "Stay exactly where you are," to all of the fans. And he went and he started at the left-hand side and he signed every single autograph for every fan inside the car park. And said, "Don't anybody move or you'll lose your place. Stay where you are." And he worked it. But now you wouldn't get within, well, in fact, literally, you wouldn't get within a mile of Manchester United's training ground because it's at the end of a very long road where they've got security.
A story of a while ago, someone had videoed the Arsenal players coming out, and one of the Arsenal young fans was there. And I don't know if one of the players didn't see the young kid or whatever happened there, but the general narrative that came out was the players ignored the young fan there. It sort of blew up for a few days there, and it was all over Sky Sports, and it got me thinking on whether the players in that situation meant to do that or give that image off deliberately or not, which I'm sure they didn't. It's so sad to see, though, isn't it? That some players now they generally will get off the coach, they'll have the headphones on, and essentially they'll just be able to zone out of everything, really, won't they? Rather than seeing the fans, and because for them it might only take a minute to sign a couple of autographs, but to that fan that'll last a lifetime as a memory.
Yeah, it's a difficult thing. I'll defend the players. I remember the Arsenal story, excuse me, that you're talking about, almost as a defence mechanism. The players put headphones on when they get off the team bus. So that's
Yeah,
what they look like they're in their own zone, and they don't stop and they don't sign autographs, because if they stop and they sign one, then the next guy's, "Well, he signed it for him. He didn't. We were there. Well done. He wouldn't." So I think that it's either one or it's all. And I think when it comes to match days, now they try to get the players into the zone. There are so many commercial, media, groundkeeping staff, people that are paying in the VIP clubs. Football's almost become like animals at the zoo, that you go to see them and there's a Beckham, there's a Bellingham, and if you go to a petting zoo, you get to pet them and feed them, which is maybe
yeah,
back to our days and going down the divisions. I think the higher you go, the further they are in their own kind of enclosure. And if they come over and I've had it when I've done interviews before, and some big player comes to interview you and you're there interviewing them, all of a sudden there'll be another 20, 30 media on your back. So that has changed as well. You used to do a lot of that at Real Madrid when I go in and get Steve McManaman or Nicholas Anelka was there. I want Anelka come and do an interview, and he'd come and chat because we reckon, and we'd be chatting, and the next thing we'd turn, and then people would literally be kind of pushing me and crushing me. It becomes difficult with the players, and that sometimes the fans, and like the fan you're talking about there, that was a corporate fan, a young kid, was probably to them just part of the furniture. They've been standing there. They've probably passed that young boy or young girl maybe a dozen times during the course of the day. They know that it is their duty at some point to sign that, but unfortunately, as the video was rolling, they didn't sign it at that point. And they go about things, and many are really nice humans and individuals and solid citizens, and you do get one or two that are slightly above themselves and think they've got this rock star status. So, but they're like anybody in life, anybody in any office or any department, or any going to have different personalities.
And one of the things as well, going off that, back onto our beloved old city, that I've not been able to get to as many games as I used to get because I obviously live down south now. And it's so great to see since the takeover, the whole club seems to have changed, and the players are all seem as one now. They're interacting with the fans again, and it just seems like a completely different club. And I'm sort of jealous that I live all the way down here during this amazing time where we had that spell of disgruntlement and previous ownership and things like that. What's your thoughts on where they've gone from to where they are at now?
Interesting thoughts. Maybe some which we wouldn't record. But yeah, the current ownership, I think, are great. They come in, they've done so many things right. They've had a look at what created the division between the last regime and the supporters. And they've looked at the assets, and they've looked at what makes people happy. And I think they've read people, and they've read the mood of the city and the supporters and the different mentality in Hull, because it's different to any other place in the country as well. And they've made it work. And what they've done, they've empowered people behind the scenes as well, likes of Joe Clutterbuck, who is the media and the commercial guru. And if he goes with them an idea and he thinks it's going to work, then they say, yeah, go off and make it work. And that's helped with getting fans inside the ground and capture the imagination. I think Liam Rossini's come in and he's done a brilliant job. I think initially when they appointed what was the name of the guy last year?
Shot at Arveladze, ex-Rangers player.
Yeah, and he came in, and I think Shota came in, and the idea then I think was probably to sign a load of players and to Shota come up and make them a team. I think, to be fair to Liam, he's come in and said, "Oh, I don't mind one or two of your ideas," and these guys coming in, but I'm going to sign players that I know that are fit for purpose. And I think they've narrowed it down. So I think it's been a learning curve for them on the playing side, and that they trust the manager. And then when it comes to the commercial activity, they trust the commercial team and the media. They've got great media guys behind the scenes as well. You will watch the channels there, and they have learned to trust there. And then the fans have come on board as well. People badmouth the Allams previously, but the one thing I would say about them is they came in when the club was right on its uppers, and they inherited an awful lot of issues that people didn't know about behind the scenes, and they sorted the club out and they ran it like a business. They didn't know football. It'd be like me trying to run their marine business. I'd go in and have an idea how I could run a business, and but I wouldn't know the intricacies. And they kind of misread what they wanted from people, and they made themselves billionaires, millionaires, whatever, by doing things their own way. So if they'd had better PR or entrusted people to do the jobs, I think it would have been a different story. But the current owners have come and done a fantastic job, invested, now getting a return on the investment. I've got a good friend who's a championship manager that thinks Hull City stand a really good chance of being there or thereabouts when it comes to final count at the end of the season. They've done things very cleverly.
I mean, Liam Rossini, that guy comes across so well. I mean, the way he speaks, the way he acts, everything. And I don't know if you saw it, but a couple of months ago there was a little bit of footage that the club released of him giving a team talk to some of the players just on a Monday or Tuesday or whatever, just before training. Oh my God, I watched that and I was like, run for a brick wall for this guy. I mean, he was unbelievable. The way he was coming across and the passion. I don't think you can fabricate that. You can have all the tools, but the way you can come across and the delivery, if it's genuine, the people can see it, can't they?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, I know him. I know his dad's my age, and I've worked with a gentleman who's been a manager himself. Did he have the record of being having the shortest managerial tenure or something like that? Didn't he get sacked the same day?
I think Liam actually referenced that in an interview a while back.
And he's a chip off the old block, because Leroy's a wonderful guy, and Liam, I think he was a good player. We know that, and he played for City. But I think he's made for management, and he's a bright boy, and he's a student of the game. He knows the game. He's got respect. And I think the hardest thing at Hull City at the moment is what we do or they do when he moves on, because I think he'll be on the radar of many clubs, and the more successful he'll become in the next 6 to 9 months, the greater the likelihood that he's going to get snaffled by a Premier League team. So Hull City needs to have a plan B and a plan C in place now, going, okay, what happens if we get, we have a good run in the FA Cup in January and
Yeah.
Bournemouth or Brighton?
Because he's still early on in his journey. He's one of those types of guys, though, that I think, for the time being at least, that he probably sees, right, I know where I'm at the moment. I'm not quite where I want to be yet. If ever there's a measured sort of guy that would make measured sort of decisions, it is Liam Senior.
Oh, I hear where you're at the moment.
Don't get me wrong, I think if he keeps on going the way we all think he could, it will eventually. But I think, at least in the short to medium term, I think he sort of knows where he's at and maybe quite feel just yet that he's ready for that next step up.
Oh, absolutely, and it'd be foolish to go. And I think but he's realistic enough. Foolish isn't the right word. He'd be realistic enough and smart enough to realise that now isn't the time. That he's got to make his name. He's got to make mistakes. He's got to learn.
That's right.
The transfer window, learn what he's doing there, develop players. But yeah, I think he's going along the lines, and I know that clubs are looking at that level, maybe not the top kind of 10 clubs, but that kind of mid-table level as they're looking for the next thing. The next Sean Dyche, the next David Moyes, or that next kind of piece there. He's part of that next generation. We're talking 6, 9, 12 months away. In the ideal world, he takes Hull City up to the Premier League and establishes them as the top 10 team, and then it's easier to find the next manager and find his replacement.
That's right.
He really is destined for big things, is it?
Absolutely. One of the things I was just thinking of there is you mentioned the Allens, and one of the things I've got to give them credit for. Well, two things really. One, they sold the club to a guy that seems have the right ideas in terms of the way he wants to take the club, the right way about him with regards to engaging with the fans and all that comes with it. Because I think there was some talk some years ago when they were in the Premier League that they were going to sell it to the people that own Reading or did own Reading, and. Yeah. I think we can all say we dodged a bullet there, or at least from a Hull City perspective. But one of the things that the Allams did is they sorted the academy out, and some of the players that they got through in a fairly short space of time, a couple of years, really. I mean, some of those players have gone on for 40-odd million pounds. I mean,
Robertson came in, Snodgrass came in, Steve Bruce is probably the best manager we've ever had. I guess Bowen would be scouted in their time. Did he come through the system? They ran it well as a business. So the biggest problem for me with them was their PR. When you talk about the ownership, like I used to get slaughtered on Twitter by passionate Hull City fans when I had the hashtag "Be careful what you wish for." But you look at them now. That the two there's the guy that bought Barnsley and the guy that bought Reading, and you look at those clubs now, and that's where Hull City would be now. There's also another ownership group that was, I don't think I'm breaking any confidences, and this is where I got a lot of stick on Twitter. I knew what was happening, but I think it came and then say they were buying Hull for 35 million. 10 million of that would go when they sold Abel Hernandez. So they said, well, the club's worth this, but he's worth 10. So, and you remember, I think it was the guy that went to Newcastle, the midfield player, and the Allams had said the club is worth this much, is what the playing pool.
Mo
Diarmi went for 8 million in the end, and they said, and these guys said, well, if you can get 8 million, then you can have that 8 million. But if we only get 5. So I think that kind of thing, it might be not that specific, but a lot of people that are coming in were seeing the assets and saying, well, if it's that, then you can have that money once he's sold. And I think they were. Many would say they were irresponsible. I think they were very responsible in their stewardship of the club and ensuring these people that came and they were like vultures sniffing around a potential Premier League club, that they did well in ensuring that when it moved on to a very responsible custodian. And I think they selected the right guy in there, because there were some people that were very close to being charlatans. And it's like, I live on Merseyside now, and I'm going to be really careful what I say with the Everton situation. But, you're probably better having the Everton owners that they've got currently than the ones that are trying to come in and buy the club at the moment. And it's a very similar situation. If I put something on Twitter today, they go, oh, no, we need new owners. This guy's not. Yeah, but do you know what you're getting yourself? Do you quite know what you're getting yourself into? Sometimes it's better to wait 2 or 3 years, see it out, and then let the right people come in.
One of the things that I will say in terms of like transfer business that wasn't the best when the Allams were in charge was selling Andy Robertson for 8 million quid. But in the same deal, if you remember, they got Kevin Stewart for around 3 or 4 of that. So essentially, they sold the most promising left back in the Championship for 4 million quid, which if you look at it now, and he's probably worth 60, 70 plus in some people's eyes, nothing, is it? Absolute nothing. It's the steal of the year, that.
It was an incredible deal, and I used to watch a lot of the Hull games. But you would notice at that time how many goals were scored at the far post where Andrew had got himself slightly out of position. So Hull City was a learning curve. And when he came to Liverpool, and all the fans, because I do a lot of the LFC TV, and they said, "Who's this guy?" And I said, "He's not quite ready for the Premier League." And they didn't play him until October, November time, and then they drip fed him into the team. And now, he's a constant, and he's gone to a whole new level. But I don't think anybody at that point would have thought that he was going to go and explode. We had, was it Josh Tymon as well? And everybody was after him.
He went to, yeah, that was the case, wasn't it? Because that was another one where you could say, looking back, well, we probably should have avoided that situation.
He's only 24 now, and he's just moved to Swansea from Stoke for 2 million in the summer. So I think they were at a similar level player.
And I don't actually think now that if the Josh Tymon situation was happening now under the current ownership, I actually think Adrian, the owner, would have probably just offered him what he wanted, because at the time I think it was the case that he was on, YTS or scholarship for deal, and he just wanted like a couple of grand extra a week or something. And I think the owners at the time, at least what was coming out anyway, so that you can only go on that, those fans, was that they didn't want to offer him whatever he was thinking he wanted. So they had that weird thing where I think Stoke only had to pay some sort of like fairly small fee, where instead of like what would have been potentially a bigger transfer fee later down the line had they agreed a deal. So, I mean, there's those sort of situations that, hindsight being 2020, you sort of look back and you go, oh, I don't know. I mean, could you imagine that happening now? And I will give the current owners credit that we seem to be tying down our youngsters to longer term deals now, where there was a phase a few years ago where we waited till the few months were on left on the deal. Whereas now they're going, right, we've got a crop here, we want to keep, let's give them 2, 3, 4 year deals, whatever, and secure our assets essentially, which makes perfect sense. And one of the sort of the star players that left in recent memory was Keane Lewis-Potter, wasn't he? And he's had a bit of a mixed start at Brentford. I think he had an injury, didn't he? And that set him back a little bit. What a talent he could be if it all sort of pans out the way we all want it to for him.
Yeah, he's a typical Brentford player, and they do. We're talking about West Ham before. It's the typical kind of player that they bring in, that they nurture, that they're not quite. We've got Kevin Schade there as well. Ivan Toney came in from Peterborough.
Yeah,
at the time, players that have got back to potential that aren't quite ready at that point. And I think they've been very clever with Keane Lewis-Potter, and that they bided their time. They gave him a running the team last year, and I can't remember what the time was, but then he picked up an injury and he was out of the team. When you've seen when he comes on, he's got that burst. That starburst at Brentford. And I think he'll get a good run this season because they've changed the way they play, and they won't be so dependent and so reliant on Ivan Toney. And I think he's trying to plan his escape when he's allowed to play football again after his ban. And they'll have a different way of playing that isn't relying. He's maybe the Brentford equivalent of Harry Kane.
Yeah.
And Kane's gone. Tottenham have gone to another level, and Brentford will do the same. That if Toney does move on, then they'll become more of a strike force rather than a line leader and an individual.
I always said when that move happened, I said, I didn't begrudge him the move in the slightest. I was actually pleased for him. I mean, which is, if you say that on City Twitter when something like that happens, you get absolutely slaughtered for it. But my view was he went a year too early. That was my view, because I look at what happened with Jared before he went to West Ham. He had that extra year. I think it took him he said he'd maybe stay till the January or whatever, and then readdress the situation. But in that time, he further developed. He kept on scoring loads of goals and improving as a player. And as such, he made people think, oh, he's gone from being ready in a short while to potentially ready now, which is a big difference, isn't it? When you think about it in terms of a player's progression.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, you never know behind the scenes what's going on. And these days,
True.
Of advisors and advisors are saying, well, we could get this move now. And so with KLP, you don't know what's going on. I think I did the end of season player of the year, and I think he won everything.
He did. That's right. Yeah.
Comes up and you think, my goodness, this lad's young. He looks like he should be the ball boy rather than the star player. But if you've got people behind him, it's very hard for him to say, no, I'm going to turn down that to stay at Hull.
Well, I think I'm going off that, Rob, as well. I remember hearing after he left that I think Adjan came out and he basically said how he'd had meetings with the player and the agent, and Adjan wasn't happy with the way the agent was coming across quite forcefully in terms of the way he wanted it to go. And so he literally just went, look, he was happy to give the player more money, whatever he wanted on that front. But he said he didn't like the way that, in his view, that the representatives for KLP were maybe coming across and um, I think he said something to the effect of the way they were speaking about the club at the
Yeah,
time in a
yeah,
disrespectful manner, and Arjun just went fine, right, and sold him. Because of he knew the writing was on the wall, because he could see the situation, but his view was, well, just stay an extra year because it'll be good for your development, which I think is potentially might have been the right thing. Who knows? But one of the players that everybody at the moment is going, is he going to stay? Is he not? Is the rising star in the centre back position in the Championship, Jacob Greaves. Now, I'm old enough to remember Mark Greaves, his dad, like playing the old third division. It seems a bit crazy that 20 plus years later we've got Junior that's in the same team, might just be better than his dad.
yeah. Well, I think he'd probably think he's better than his dad. Yeah, he's probably played high level than his dad did as well. Yeah, he's a great player and again a lovely guy, great individual, young man who's got a great presence. You know, good leader at the club, has the club at heart as well. If I'm really honest, I'm not quite sure if he's ready to make that leap into the. You know, if you're going to leave Hull City, you go to the Premier League. You're not going to go to a top team in the Championship. That'd be a waste of time for him, a waste of time for the club. You know, you might say he might go to a Sheffield Wednesday or go to a Leeds United, which would be seen by some to be bigger clubs than Hull City. We would disagree. But if he's going to go, he needs to go to a West Ham or Everton aren't doing particularly well at the moment. You know, they don't want to go to a Sheffield United. So he's probably in the right place. And as you said, he's probably got a year or 18 months, which will define his career, whether he's going to be a top-end Championship player or whether he's going to be a Harry Maguire or whether he's going to be an Andy Robertson that's able to go to that next step. And the thing is keeping him engaged and keeping him going. Because at times last year played centre half, and then at times they were playing on the wide of defence as well. So he's probably been knocking on the manager's door and saying, "Hey, you know, did it for you last year when you first came in? But this is my position." And he's getting a run there. But yeah, he's certainly got the potential to be, you know. He shouldn't be saying it, to leave Hull City. I hope he doesn't. I hope he goes on and plays 500 games.
Oh, me too. Yeah.
He's the captain in the Premier League and playing another, taking the team into Europe and playing an FA Cup final, things that I never thought I'd be saying about Hull
I
City,
know.
but have happened in our lifetime.
I think as well, though, like you say, he seems to have a good head on his shoulders, and I think even he probably would, if you asked him now, even if he was being honest, he would probably say, "Yeah, right now is probably not the right time for me in terms of my development. Maybe he needs an extra few years or something at the level he's sort of playing at." But isn't it just great to see that, like the changes that's happened in a relatively short space of time, though? That's what gets me. It's like the whole mood of the club is just shifted. I think the club deserve a massive amount of credit for this. When they took over, they were getting 9 or 10,000 in a stadium called 25, and within what 18 months, they're now getting 20 to 23,000 every week.
Like any club that you belong to, a social club, any kind of sporting, you feel part of it. Everybody's part of the club. We're all components, from the fans to the people that work behind the scenes to the players that are out there to the owners as well. And it feels that there is that great togetherness, which became fragmented in previous years because of the mistakes that were made by the leadership, and maybe because of factions within the stands and the grandstands at the club as well, that were turning people on against each other, and people were kind of divided. But I think everybody pretty much now on the same page. I think there's very little that you can disagree with what is being done in the way that they're getting supporters in, the way they're looking after the supporters. So it's good, and you can't be giving tickets away forevermore, but you want to getting them in, and you're then creating habits. And it's like you or me, the first time you go and then you're engaged, and next time you're willing to pay 30 quid and harangue your mum or your dad to take it to the next game as well. So it's clever management, brilliant management.
It was a smart move as well, getting Tan Kessler in as a chief exec and based here permanently. Because obviously Ajin flies between Turkey and here quite
Yeah.
regularly. But I think to have someone that is there all the time and is able to filter things back as and when.
Right people in the right job, and I don't think Tanny's he's a very serious-minded player.
I listen to him and I'm like,
You
he's
speak to him,
articulate, isn't he?
he takes on board things that the owner says and goes yes, 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 and then hopes that
Maybe
it
not right
gets it
now,
makes
but
more.
maybe.
Yeah, let's see how we. Yeah, I was there the night that I did the Q&A with Adjan when they said he's going to announce something big tonight, but nobody knew what it was going to be, and then it turned out being the trip where they're going to take 200 fans to Turkey on a holiday, but they'd not really thought it through. Is it 200 fans and their partners? Is it 100 fans and their partners? Is it going to be season ticket? And it was a great and a wonderful gesture. And when are we going to go and how are we going to do it? And then they were trying to source flights from Leeds Airport and Humberside Airport, maybe some from Manchester, and it come up with a brilliant idea. But I think Tanny's maybe and goes, let's have a little think about that now. We'll sign, and they signed all these players initially, and they all came in, and it's like we haven't got a changing room big enough for all these guys. So I think Tanny's probably that Mr. Sensible that they need. They're going,
Yeah, the yin and the yang.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, final couple of things because I've obviously taken way too much of your time up, so I thank you for that. Obviously, you do a lot of contributory work for other stations in South Africa and Sirius Radio in America. What's that like? Being able to broadcast to a different audience in a different part of the world?
It's good. I enjoyed it. I mean, bear in mind for 24 years I was at Sky, so you were restricted to only working for Sky, and I was never able to kind of take on any of the invitations to work for other people. And again, that's how the media landscape has changed now, and that people tend not to work exclusively for one company, which is probably a new evolution in the last 4 or 5 years. So I'm now effectively freelance. My main gig, my main job is now doing Spanish football for ESPN. So that is what keeps me busy on a weekend. It's always going to be Barca or Real Madrid. This weekend it's Seville against Real Madrid, and anything around that I kind of fit in. So I just enjoy what I do and do what I enjoy. That's that should be tattooed on my forehead. So if somebody comes in and says, do you want to do Sirius FM? And that's part of the ESPN group, and they're promoting La Liga, and you get a chance to talk to Rodney Marshes over there, or a guy called Ray Hudson, who's a very famous commentator in the States. Our parents remember him playing for Newcastle United back in the day, and he's become a big media personality, and they'll just chat to me. It's become a thing now. They ring me normally about 11 o'clock at night, and sometimes I'll be in a train station, or I might be in a bar, or last time I did it in a red telephone booth in the middle of London in Trafalgar Square. So it's big, and again, South African TV asked me to do some stuff. They had a regular show on a Friday where we talked about Serie A, La Liga and the Premier League as well. And again, talking to ex-pros or people that are over there, it's good. And I'm not restricted to who I work for now. So if somebody wants me to talk about football as we've just done, as long as we can fit it in and we can find a time, I'm always happy to do it. And I'm still doing stuff at Sky, but no longer are they my main employer. So Tuesday night is Swansea. I forget what game I'm doing. Huddersfield Swansea on Tuesday night. So that becomes part of the portfolio now. I do Premier League games for them. It's the main provider, which then goes to the world. We see the 3 o'clock kickoffs in every country, apart from the UK, or certainly not legally in the UK anyway. So it's a lovely portfolio. And then next week, as I say, I do the UEFA games for a company called Gravity. And so next week I've got the Servette Sheriff Tiraspol group, which I've got next week, and then I do European games as well. So I've got the Switzerland group in Europe. So I came back from Spain last weekend to do the Switzerland game. So it's lovely. It's great.
How do you find it? I said this in one of the messages on Twitter to you, and I genuinely meant it as a compliment. How do you find the stamina? Like, I listen to your schedule now, and I'm 33, and I listen to your schedule now, Rob, and I'm like, that sounds tiring. That sounds exhausting. Can't imagine what it must be like for you. That's like, right, I'm here, I'm doing that. Right, I've got to remember this, got to do that.
Yeah, it is discipline, and that's something I kind of learned that today when I leave you now, I'm coming back. I'm in Spain, but I'm coming back to the UK to do a Spanish game tomorrow. So I kind of got a plan that from 6 o'clock tonight and get on the plane. That's a flying office till I get back. So I've just got to focus on that, and that's my time until 11 o'clock tonight, and then have my breakfast in the morning, and then I know that from the game's 5:30 tomorrow, so from about 10:30, I'll have my breakfast, chill out, read the papers, but then it's like sitting around every time you do a game, like studying.
Are you based pretty much? Are you based pretty much all year in Spain, or do you just go and fly back and forth as and when?
Yeah, sole point. When I I'm based on the Wirral. I'm
Right.
about 1.5 miles away from Tranmere Rovers ground. So if I do get a day off and not doing anything, my son takes me to see Tranmere play. We can walk or cycle there. So yeah, my average next week is an average week for me, and I'll do Saturday in London. I'll travel back north on Sunday. Monday's my one chill out day where hopefully I'll get some golf. Tuesday I'm back to London to do a Premier League game for Sky. We do it off the TV screen, off tube as they say. Wednesday is a prep day. Thursday is Sheriff Tiraspol against Servette. Friday is effectively a prep day, but might be South African TV or Sirius will call up. It's a 10-minute chat. And then the following Saturday, I've got another game. But don't ask me what it is because that's 8 days away and I'm not that far ahead yet.
Final three, promise you. So over your career, you've done a lot of things, seen a lot of things, and seen a lot of players come and go. Who's been the best player to watch and commentate on? And second part of that, who's been the best player that you remember Hull City ever having?
Oh, good question. First one easy. We've kind of covered that. Lionel Messi. I'll stick by that. He's from another planet. An absolute joy. Hull City. Oh my goodness. Ken Wagstaff was my favourite player, but he was the hardest autograph to ever get. My dad actually had to stand in front, and as Waggy tried to evade me like he evaded defenders, my dad had to kind of usher him back. I love Chris Chilton. He was a brilliant player. And again, I'm going back to my youth now when I was a kid. And then when I came to Hull and I trained at Hull City, Chillo was the assistant manager. Probably those two. Jared Bowen is probably in modern time is the best player I've seen in a Hull City shirt as well. So yeah, those guys. Getting Gareth Roberts, the great custodian, he played about 3,000 games for the club. So yeah, I mean, Chris Chilton probably is the one, and of course when it comes to, I suppose, role models, the two that I've interviewed virtually everybody, but the two that I admire: Tony Norman, great man, wonderful human being, friends on Facebook, and then if I ever met Jeff Whelans, that I'd be a nervous wreck. I'd turn to jelly if I met Jeff Whelans.
See, for me, my era was Nicky Barmby. When we signed him. Don't know how
Never
we did
call
it.
him Nicky, by the way. Never call him Nicky. He gets very, very upset.
Sorry, Sir Nick.
There you go. You learn something every day.
You do. But we signed him on a free when he was 30, which I don't know what the modern equivalent to that could be, but that's to drop down to League Two when you still got a few extra years to potentially play at the top. And possibly for me would be because I was a goalkeeper when I was younger. Not very good, but that's the position I enjoyed. Bo Mile, what a man. Because I was there, as I say, I didn't come in when the glory years started to happen. I was there before that, the old days. And I think the fact that you look back now and you go, you got 7 or 8 years service out of one player, hardly ever happens now. And you look at the contribution that those two both made in that particular time in on the rise is they've got to be in the mix for me anyway. And also the second thing, what was it like to be involved in the World Cup '94?
It was brilliant. As you know, I'd been out there and I was coaching, played football out there. And when I left college, I went back and coached every year. In '94, my wife was she was pregnant. Ellis was, twins were due to be born in October. So I went over there to coach football in Minnesota, but I also dropped a line to a guy called Trevor East, who was the head of ITV Sport back then, and actually had been a massive Derby County fan later. I think later on went to become a director of Derby, saying, if you get short and you need an extra voice or whatever, I'll be in the country. I was desperate to work on the World Cup because I'd been part of the progression and the development of soccer in the States. And Trevor just rang. Well, the phone rang one day, and we don't have mobile phones like we do now. And this big kind of field phone came over. It was either my wife, who was obviously pregnant, or it was Trevor, and it was him. And he said, "Do you want to come down to Dad? Would you like to do some games?" And I said, "Well, yeah." He said, "Well, we found we're one kind of voice short on the games that aren't going out live. Would you come down and do some reporting and whatever?" So I said, "Yeah." He said, "I thought you would." So he said, "Your flight's booked. You come tomorrow morning. Your first game's in 2 days' time." And I did about 8 games on the World Cup. They were all, again, off tube, the king of off tubes. Didn't go to any of them to work on. Went to a couple to watch, but not to work on. Actually, when I was talking to the Switzerland press officer the other day about this, went to Washington to interview the Switzerland manager, and that was Roy Hodgson.
Oh, wow.
So ironically, the world turns, I'm covering Switzerland on a monthly basis in their fight for the European Championship. So it was bittersweet because it was great, and I got up to the semi-final stages, and my wife gave birth 3.5 months prematurely, so I had to come back from the World Cup. So it was one of the pinnacle of my career work-wise, but also it was a really tough period of time as well because my wife gave birth to twins. Sadly, we lost one of the boys, and Ellis has made us very, very proud. So yeah, it was wonderful being at the World Cup and being part of that and going back to the States, but also that kind of turning point in life as well, where you come back and life kind of hits you very hard in the face.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
No, obviously, do you have a preference? Well, as a memory, well, covering the World Cup or covering Champions League finals?
Classicos, definitely Classicos. I did the World Cup, did it up, I was the periphery man. If the game was on BBC, I'd do it for ITV, and when they show the highlights later on. So I was the highlights guy, me and a wonderful commentator called Peter Brackley. So that was great being there. I did the Champions League final, but I did that for Sky, and it was when 3D was being sold to the public. So me and Alan Smith did the 3D version of the Champions League final. In fact, I did the Champions League final last year as well for DAZN for the Canadian audience. But doing the Classico is like nothing else because you're the main commentator there, and you're doing it currently for ESPN or previously for Sky, and you are the voice that people are listening to, and you're right there at the heart of it. And you're part of the fabric of the game and the day and the spectacle and the carnival. Whereas on the other stuff, you're kind of on the periphery. So yeah, doing a Classico is the most special thing, and there's nothing quite like it. And they're two different. If you're at the new camp when it's open, it's 98,000 fans as far as the eye can see, and it's this incredible bowl. But then when you go to Madrid, it's like a chocolate box, and it's almost like in fact, they've got a roof now, so you're up to on the inside of a cardboard box commentating on this football match, and it's a nosebleed situation, you're down like that. So yeah, they're both different and they're both special, and that for me, that's the main thing doing the Classicos.
And finally, when you look back on your career, when you retire, whenever that day comes, what do you want your legacy to be as a broadcaster and as a commentator?
Somebody who enjoyed it, kind of called it like a fan, saw it like a fan, but maybe gave that little bit of information to make the fan and the viewing experience that little bit more educational, or little, adding something to it. As my boss always said to me, you're there to complement the pictures. If you've got something that is useful to know that we don't know about, tell me about it. But otherwise, shut up and let the crowd make the noise.
I always think to add the lyrics to the music to the theatre, the visual spectacle.
Yeah. I mean, there's a guy out there, and I owe him everything. When things went quiet a couple of years ago and we lost the La Liga contract, there's a young man who was obviously had a montage to Messi, and he put my voice to it, put it to music, and it's like a 7.5, 8-minute video of all of the best Messi moves, and remember the name Lionel Messi. And for some reason, he just used my voice on it, from the time. And even I'm thinking, actually, I think I got the tone right there. So he's a young man. I've since tracked him down. And when ESPN came after me, it came down to them seeing the power of social media, them seeing this on YouTube, or it might be in Twitter, and going, "Whoa, dear me." And then again, recently, when Messi went into Miami and they did a big launch on Apple TV, they saw this video and they nicked a couple of the lines. They went through the right channels at Sky, and then came to me and said, "Do we have your permission?" So yeah, it's just
That's awesome.
Saying the right thing at the right time in the right place, which is not as easy.
Now, you just mentioned your voice there. Quickly, what I read somewhere that your voice was used in Coronation Street. Is this true, or has that just been made up?
Yeah, two claims to fame there. One worked at Granada. Granada made Coronation Street. Kevin Webster would often be watching television, and they needed something on the TV for Kevin Webster to be watching, which made sense. It was football because it's a mechanic, cliche. So they'd nick one of the tapes, stick it in the DVD, stick it in there, and Kevin be watching us. And the other claim to fame was that Granada made a show called Cracker with the great Robbie Coltrane back in the day. And I did a voiceover on a horse race for that, which became the opening scene of Cracker, which went on to be a multi-award-winning show as well. So yeah, that's my drama career.
What a brilliant way to finish on. Thank you so much for giving me your time, Robert. It's meant the world to me. I was really excited about this today because it's not often I get a chance to talk football with someone that's just as passionate and just as interested.
Absolutely. Up the Tigers, as they say.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Rob. Take
No
care.
problem at all, John. Take care. Cheers, man.
Cheers, man. Bye bye.